For generations, the Marines have had four-head hunters who are at the top of their ranks. Usually they occupy the Admiral spot and the Fleet Admiral spot. Those four who sit at the top of the Marine ranks are there to oppose the Yonko, the strongest of the pirates. See, in the One Piece world, balance is a very important thing. So when it's disrupted, it has major consequences. And so far in the story, both sides of power have been disrupted. See, the funny thing is that the two people that have disrupted powers on both sides of the spectrum have actually fought on Egghead. But the thing is that we know how Luffy disrupted the power. So how did Kizaru? Well, in this video, I'm going to be going over what balance means to the Marines and how Kizaru has disrupted it. But before I get into this video, I'd like for you guys to like and subscribe, as it's a way of showing support and it only takes 2 seconds. Plus, it will give me more incentive to upload. But anyway, enough of that. Let's get back into the video. In the Marines, there are several ranks, but as explained earlier, there are two pivotal ranks that determine everything: the Admiral and the Fleet Admiral. So far in the story, we've seen 3 iterations of these 3 roles rotating. The first iteration or generation would be Garp, who I know was a Vice Admiral, but he was basically an Admiral since he was offered it many times, which means the role may have been open, Sengoku, and Shiryu. From the interactions they've had with other characters alone, we're able to determine their personalities. Each of them have their own personalities and way of approaching things, but here is where the balance comes in. On one side, we can see that Shiryu is all about order. If you set out to do a task, you must complete it. That's why in this panel she asked Fujitora why he didn't capture the pirates. To prove that she is a very stern person, you can tell with her interactions with Doflamingo that she is very, very cold. But I do think due to her connections to Garp and Sengoku, she is lightened up a little bit more. But out of the 3 of them, she is the most stern and cold. On the other side, we have Garp. Garp believes that justice will prevail depending on what you believe it is. He's a free spirit. He doesn't follow orders necessarily, but he will still do what needs to be done for justice to prevail. So now that leaves one person, and that one person is Sengoku. So what is Sengoku's role in all of this? He's the perfect balance between the two. He embodies both justices, but without the extremes. Unlike Garp, Sengoku isn't the type to just spontaneously get up and say, okay, let's go do this, or I don't want to do this. At the same time, he's not as harsh as Shiryu, making him the perfect balance between the two. In the end, we can really see why he was promoted to Fleet Admiral. Due to his perfect balance, he was able to control the Marines perfectly. They weren't too ruthless, but they weren't too lax. Now that we've gone over the first iteration, let's go over the second iteration. In the second iteration, we have Akainu, Aokiji, and Kizaru. Once again, each of them play a role. Now, I know this hasn't fully been confirmed, but I do believe that Kizaru was mentored by Sengoku, and I do believe that Shiryu did mentor Akainu, which leaves us with Aokiji, who we do know was mentored by Garp. Now, just by listening to who they were mentored by, I think we all know where they're meant to fall into place. But now, here's the problem. Where did it go wrong? Why did Sengoku nominate Garp's student instead of his own? And why did Oda choose Akainu over Kuzan? But to put it simply, Kizaru still hasn't made up what his ideals are. See, unlike even the new generation, his generation, and the one before him, he hasn't made his mind up. For instance, if Sengoku was ordered to kill Corazon, he just wouldn't, since he has his own thought process. While on the other hand, his student Kizaru just doesn't have that in him, and that is why the scales have now tipped. In my eyes, I believe that is why Akainu was promoted instead of Kuzan. At the time, and even up until just now, Kizaru's heart has been laid more on absolute justice and what needs to be done. But in actuality, that's not how he feels. Kizaru, just like Sengoku, deep down is both. He can do what needs to be done, but at a certain limit. He can't do everything Akainu can do, but he can't do everything Kuzan can do. As I've said before, he is meant to be the perfect balance, but up until now, he hasn't. That's truly why Sengoku never nominated him. You cannot make somebody a Fleet Admiral if they don't know where their ideals lie. As the Fleet Admiral, you need to know what you want and what you believe is the best for your soldiers and how your army should be structured. Anyway, let's get into the new iteration. Unlike the last 2 iterations, only 2 new people have come up, them being Greenbull and Fujitora. Now, I know all of us have seen how they approach their ways of justice, and they even clash over this. Fujitora was the replacement for Kuzan, and the replacement for Akainu was Greenbull. Now, compared to the last 2 iterations, this iteration is very, very split up and divided. I believe this is the case because Akainu is mainly focused on one iteration of justice. If Kuzan was promoted to Fleet Admiral, this exact same thing would happen. Greenbull would feel a certain way since his version of justice isn't being portrayed enough. Due to Akainu not being a balance, all 3 of them feel a need to do their own thing. Fujitora, even though he was told not to go on any marine-owned islands, he still went to Marijois. Although it's not a marine-owned island, he knows he's still not meant to be there. And now Kizaru doesn't even feel like getting up and doing anything on the island since he's just killed one of his best friends. And Greenbull right now feels like he needs to get his street cred back up because he's let Akainu down on 2 occasions. That is why having a balance between the 2 extremes as Fleet Admiral is so important. But that leaves us with the question, what will happen next with the Marines? As right now in the story, Kizaru doesn't seem to like his job, Greenbull is off somewhere else, and Fujitora is nowhere to be seen since he can't go back to any marine-owned islands and will where else can he go? I think Green Balls is probably the easiest one to know. His way of justice is being portrayed by Akainu, and the only thing he's done is just let himself down. So the only thing he can do is go around collecting more pirates, and you'll probably run into a Yonko crew sometime soon. Which Yonko crew it may be, well, we'll have to wait and see. Now next is Kizaru, and Kizaru has one or two options. But one, he can either leave the Marines and do his own thing like Kuzan. Number two, he can continue to stay there and put himself through torture. I think by now he should have his ideals together, but if he doesn't, then I genuinely do feel bad for the guy. Many people may be asking why I feel bad, but the thing is that you just don't kill your friend and stay in the exact same organization that told you to do that unless something bad in your past has happened to where you feel the need to stay there. You'll understand why Garp is still there in the Marines even after they killed his grandson. And if you haven't figured it out, figure it out through Aokiji. Aokiji believes he can change the world from outside of the Marines. So what does Garp think? Garp must obviously think you can change the world from inside of the Marines. And that is why he's tried to create so many students that can take on his will and actually just change the Marines for the better. And that's why I say I feel bad for Kizaru, because we don't know what he's been through. From what we know, he seemed like a pampered child, but aside from that, we don't really know much about him when it comes to his backstory. We know what everybody else would choose if given the decision, but Kizaru is the one that's up in the air, so he has one or two options. And finally, it's Fujitora. Fujitora is probably the most up in the air since he can do whatever he wants. He can decide to be stubborn, stay in the Marines and just argue with Sakazuki a lot more than he already does. He can either leave the Marines and go to the Revolutionary Army, he can either leave the Marines and just be on his own, he can just camp it out until he finds a Yonko crew and just ambush them for reasons we still don't know, but I don't know, that's still a theory. He can just do something completely different and just do what he wants. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a cover story of Fujitora like going around freeing slaves. Or we see a cover story of Fujitora trying to track somebody down. Many things could happen, but this is what happens when the Marines has no balance. That's what's going to make me bring this video full circle. Through his inability to choose his own ideals and own path, Kizaru has disrupted everything for the Marines. Unlike the Yonko who have been disrupted by Luffy, Luffy has done this by choice. Luffy is aiming for something. He knows what he's doing. He has his ideals. But Kizaru is doing this by accident. And I know it may seem harsh for me to pin everything on Kizaru, but that's just how it is. In his generation, he was meant to be the balance between everyone, but he just couldn't fulfill that role, and now look what's happened. Anyway, that'll be the end of this video. I was thinking of adding Kobe and Smoker into this and talking about how the future may pan out, but I don't want to do that just yet. I'll definitely get around to it eventually, since it is an idea that I have been pondering on for a long time, but obviously good things come to those who wait. But anyway, I love you guys, and I'll see you guys next time.